France is executing the most consequential reorientation of its grand strategy in over a century. What's changing? Nearly everything. Paris is pivoting away from Africa, deepening its commitments to Europe's eastern flank, backing Ukraine's NATO and EU accession, while shedding decades of strategic ambiguity toward Russia. Its long-standing belief in a European security architecture that might one day include Moscow has collapsed. In its place, a hard turn toward containment, deterrence, and defense. This is not a course correction, it's a complete rupture with past assumptions, past priorities, and past illusions. After the collapse of the Soviet Union, French foreign policy was shaped by a stubborn idea that Russia, though often adversarial, belonged inside Europe's political order. Even after the Kremlin's annexation of Crimea in 2014, Paris continued to advocate engagement. As late as 2022, President Macron warned the West not to humiliate Russia. This position undermined France's credibility, not just with Ukraine, but right across Central and Eastern Europe. Paris had long approached the region through a Russia-centric lens, prioritizing détente with Moscow over solidarity with its newer allies. But that era is over. The full-scale invasion of Ukraine, Russia's war crimes, and its sabotage and disinformation campaigns on French soil triggered a strategic reckoning in Paris. Macron now describes Russia as an existential threat, not just to Ukraine, but to the European project itself. This pivot in strategic thinking comes as France steps back from Africa, a region where its military presence has dramatically declined. Driven out of the Sahel by hostile juntas and rising anti-French sentiment, Paris is now rebalancing toward Europe. The old paradigm of managing Russia, hedging within NATO, and projecting force abroad is giving way to a new one. Defend Europe, deter Russia, and rebuild the trust that France forfeited on NATO's Eastern Front. It is a pivot rooted in a transformed geopolitical environment, and now Paris must prove it can sustain it. France's military deployments are giving this strategic change some real weight. It is currently leading NATO's enhanced forward presence in Romania with over 1,600 troops on the ground. This force will be temporarily boosted this year to about 5,000 for an upcoming multinational exercise. In addition, France has deployed Mamba air defense systems to Romania to strengthen NATO's air shielding posture. Further north, French forces are also stationed in Estonia under British command. In terms of Air Force deployments, French air patrols have been boosted over the Baltic, though France has been active in this role since 2007. In January this year, an ATL-2 maritime patrol aircraft was locked by the fire control radar of a Russian S-400 air defense system in international waters, in a move that was slammed by the French authorities. At sea, for the first time, the French Navy's Charles de Gaulle carrier group has operated under NATO command in the Eastern Mediterranean, signaling Paris's willingness to integrate its highest-end capabilities into collective defense. Macron has also proposed creating a multinational reassurance force to be stationed in strategic towns across Ukraine if a future peace deal emerges. Though still in the planning stages, the initiative underscores France's ambition to deepen its military commitment beyond NATO's borders and to deter future Russian aggression at Europe's edge. However, old security concerns persist, and France's global commitments are making its strategic posture more complicated. The country's sprawling interests across the Indo-Pacific, including in Réunion and New Caledonia, are simultaneously a cost burden but also a huge strategic advantage. As a result, France is a Pacific military power in a way that other nations in Europe are not. Today, France is reinforcing its military presence across the wider region to defend its overseas territories and to balance growing Chinese and Russian influence. For now, France's strategic pivot is holding. Troops, resources, and political focus are flowing toward Europe's eastern flank, even as Paris remains committed to its overseas territories. But sustaining this shift will demand careful balancing of domestic pressures, global distractions, and hard financial choices. And France's pivot demands a military capable of surviving and winning in a new, harsher strategic era. The question is whether France can adapt fast enough. In 2023, Paris secured a new military budget framework, a sweeping €413 billion investment plan stretching to 2030. It promises a 40% increase in defense spending compared to the last cycle, with clear priorities: rearming for high-intensity warfare, modernizing nuclear forces, strengthening cyber and space capabilities, and rebuilding stockpiles eroded by decades of low-intensity expeditionary focus. France has adopted what officials call a war economy footing, in recognition of the fact that high-intensity warfare is back. The country must be able to deploy a full division, 19,000 troops and 7,000 vehicles, within 30 days. It must build forces able to survive in a battlefield shaped by drone swarms, massed artillery, and rapid escalation. And this additional scale is going hand in hand with modernization. The Scorpion program, France's flagship land modernization effort, aims to rewire how French forces fight, connecting vehicles, troops, and sensors into a real-time digital network. New Griffon armored personnel carriers, Jaguar combat vehicles, Serval light transports, and upgraded Leclerc tanks are key pillars. But already, some ambitions are being scaled back. Delivery targets for armored vehicles have been cut by 30%. Only around 2,300 new vehicles will enter service by 2030, far fewer than originally planned. Meanwhile, France is racing to ramp up artillery production. Shell output, once a trickle, is increasing but remains well below the needs of sustained high-intensity combat. New gunpowder factories are coming online, and Caesar howitzer production is rising to 6 units per month. Still, compared to German, Polish, or American output, French production capacity remains constrained. Air power is another priority. Macron recently announced the creation of 2 new Rafale squadrons and a €1.5 billion modernization of the Luxeuil Air Base. By 2030, the Air Force is projected to operate 137 Rafale fighters, short of the 185 initially envisioned. The strategic airlift fleet, centered on the A400M, will likewise fall short. Only 35 aircraft are expected compared to the earlier goal of 50. At sea, the French Navy faces a mixed picture. The fleet will be modernized by 2030, but not to the extent expected. The main disappointment comes from the reduced number of new defense and intervention frigates due to be delivered, with only 3 vessels entering service by the end of this decade. This delivery schedule is deliberately spread out to allow construction of units for export. As a result, by 2032, the French Navy is expected to field 15 so-called first-rank surface combatants, including a mix of FDI frigates, FREMS, and Horizon-type air defense destroyers. But there is now a strong political push to acquire at least 3 more advanced frigates to boost fleet numbers. The French Navy's next-generation aircraft carrier is also slated for delivery in the mid-2030s. Meanwhile, France's nuclear deterrent remains a budgetary heavyweight. Around 13% of total defense spending through 2030 is earmarked for modernizing ballistic missile submarines, airborne nuclear missiles, and delivery systems. While vital for national sovereignty, this investment tightens constraints on conventional rearmament. The result: France's military will be better connected, better protected, and more lethal, but not dramatically larger. The most important thing to note about France's military transformation is that it's a necessity, and the stakes are nothing less than the future security of Europe. As the United States changes its own strategic posture and competition with Russia and China intensifies, Europeans are being forced to assume more responsibility for their own defense. France, with its nuclear deterrent, expeditionary forces, and sophisticated defense industrial base, is better positioned than most, but the path ahead will be difficult. The investments laid out in the 2024 to 2030 military budget framework are vast. The rearmament drive is real, and French forces have already begun to reorient, leading NATO's battle group in Romania, patrolling Black Sea skies, surging support for Ukraine, and revitalizing alliances from the Baltic to the Indo-Pacific.